My garden was my sanctuary, a peaceful haven. But when a whisper of pain threatened to shatter the world of someone I cherished, the gentle gardener transformed. What happens when quiet devotion ignites into a fierce, unyielding resolve? This is the story of a battle fought for the most innocent heart. My garden has always been my sanctuary. At 71, my hands may be gnarled, but they know the language of the soil. The scent of basil and sun-ripened tomatoes is the smell of my history, my peace. It was in this piece that I prepared the lasagna al forno, layers of pasta, rich ragu, and creamy bechamel, a Sunday offering of love for my daughter, Diana, and my grandson, Marco. They arrived like a storm cloud moving over a sunny field. The slam of the car door was an intrusion. Diana, impeccable as always, marched Marco ahead of her. But it was my boy, my 14-year-old Marco, who made my heart clench. He was pale, with a hollowness in his eyes that didn't belong on a young face. He was a ghost of the vibrant boy who used to chase lizards between my rose bushes. Lunch was an exercise in tension. Marco barely spoke, his fork moving listlessly, pushing the food around his plate. Diana, however, never stopped. Her words were quiet, but they landed like tiny, sharp stones. "Sit up straight, Marco. Don't make that noise with your fork. Look at your Nana when she speaks to you. Say thank you." Each command was coated in a sickly sweet veneer of maternal concern, a performance for an audience of one. Me. I saw the slight flinch in Marco's shoulders each time she spoke. I tried to draw him out, asking about school, about his friends, but he would only offer one-word answers, his gaze fixed on his plate as if it held the world's most complex secrets. Diana cut the visit short. "He's tired," she announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. "He needs his rest. Let him stay the weekend, Kara," I pleaded softly. "Just him and me. We can make pizza." Diana's smile was thin and cold. "He needs discipline, Lucia, not indulgence." As I watched them leave, Marco's small wave from the car window was a silent scream for help. The word she used was discipline. The word my heart heard was punishment. The call came 3 days later. It wasn't Diana. It was the school nurse, her voice strained with professional calm. "Mrs. Rossi, it's about Marco. He's had a severe panic attack. We tried to reach his mother, but she's in an important meeting and can't be disturbed." The drive to the school was a blur of red lights and frantic prayers. I found Marco in the nurse's office, huddled on a small cot, looking small and broken. He was trembling, his breathing shallow, his eyes wide and unseeing. He didn't resist when I wrapped him in my arms and led him to my car. The silence on the way home was heavier than any words could be. I settled him on the sofa, covered him with his favorite Afghan my mother had knitted decades ago, and watched until his ragged breaths evened out in an exhausted sleep. That's when I saw it. His phone, lying on the passenger seat of my car where it must have slipped from his pocket. It lit up with a new notification. A name glowed on the screen. Mom. A cold dread, sharp and unwelcome, coiled in my stomach. I knew I shouldn't. It was an invasion of privacy. But the image of my grandson, gasping for air in that sterile office, overrode every hesitation. I picked up the phone. His lock screen was a picture of the two of us in my garden last summer, both of us laughing. My heart ached. I swiped up and the keypad appeared. On a gut feeling, a wild hope, I typed in my own birthday. It unlocked. The message thread was open. It wasn't just one message, but a torrent of them. A litany of cruelty that stole the air from my lungs. "Did you make a scene at school again? I just got a notification. You are a constant source of embarrassment. Stop being so dramatic. Everyone has problems. Why do you have to be so weak? Your weakness disgusts me. Why can't you just be a normal kid? My life would be so much easier if I didn't have to deal with you and your issues all the time." I scrolled up, my hand shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. It went on for weeks, months. A systematic dismantling of a child's spirit written by his own mother. Then I saw the last message, the one that had likely triggered the attack, the one that made the world tilt on its axis. "Sometimes I wish you didn't exist." The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. The love I had for my daughter, the woman I had raised, fractured and then crumbled into dust. It was a swift, clean death. In the ruins of that love, something else rose. It was cold and clear and hard as steel. The grandmother who worried was gone. In her place was a lioness who had just seen the threat to her cub, and she would burn the world down to protect him. The next morning, I did not call Diana. A confrontation would be a storm of her denials and accusations, and she would simply whisk Marco away, isolating him further inside the prison she had built. I had to be smarter than that. I had to be colder. When she finally called, her voice dripping with manufactured concern, I was calm. "He's still sleeping, Diana," I said, my voice even. "The school nurse said he was exhausted. Let him rest here for a couple of days. The quiet will do him good." There was a slight pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, calculating. "Fine," she conceded, likely pleased to have him off her hands. "But make sure he does his homework." The moment I hung up, the real work began. I pulled out an old address book, my fingers tracing the faded ink until I found the name I was looking for. David Chen. The son of my dear, departed friend, Aliner. He was a lawyer, a good one. A family lawyer. I called him. His voice was kind but professional as I laid out the situation, my own voice a low, steady monotone that betrayed none of the fury raging in my heart. I told him everything. Marco's retreat from the world, Diana's subtle and overt control, and finally, the messages on the phone. "Lucia, I need you to do something very carefully," David said after a long silence. "Take your own phone. Photograph every single one of those messages, every screen. Make sure the date and time are visible, then email them to me. We need a secure, documented record." I did as he instructed, my hands moving with methodical precision. Each click of the camera was a nail in the coffin of Diana's authority. "Good," he said, once he'd received them. "Now, here's what comes next. To get custody, we have to prove to a judge that Diana is a direct source of emotional harm to Marco, and that you can provide a stable, safe environment. The messages are our canon, but we need more soldiers." He advised me to make an immediate, anonymous report to Child Protective Services. Let them open an official investigation. Their findings will be an impartial, powerful piece of evidence. While they do their work, I will begin drafting the petition for emergency temporary custody. I looked over at Marco, still asleep on the sofa, his face finally peaceful in slumber. The world outside was about to explode, but in here, in my house, I would be his shield. I was no longer just his Nana. I was his general, and I was planning a war. The call to Child Protective Services was the hardest I've ever had to make. To voice my daughter's failings to a stranger, to officially brand her as a danger to her own son, felt like a betrayal of a bond I thought was sacred. But then I looked at the photographs of those text messages, and I knew the real betrayal had happened long ago. I gave the social worker the facts, my voice devoid of emotion, a simple recitation of cruelty. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. 2 days later, a CPS investigator visited Diana. The official, uniformed presence at her door must have shattered her carefully constructed world of suburban perfection. Her rage, when it came, was a hurricane. My doorbell rang with a frantic, punishing rhythm. I looked through the peephole to see Diana's face, contorted with a fury I had never witnessed before. It was a mask of pure hatred. "Lucia, open this door, you old witch! How dare you? How dare you call them on me?" she shrieked, her fists hammering against the solid oak. Marco, awakened by the noise, stood behind me, his eyes wide with fear. I put a calming hand on his shoulder. I did not open the door. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, my own house a fortress against my daughter's madness. "Go home, Diana," I said, my voice loud enough to be heard through the door. "There is nothing to discuss. For Marco's sake, we will speak in court." Her screaming devolved into threats, a torrent of venom that chilled me to the bone. Her phone began to buzz in my pocket with a relentless stream of messages. I didn't need to read them to know their content. Later, when the silence outside finally fell, I sat down and calmly read each one. "You'll regret this, old woman. I swear it. I'll tell the judge you're senile. A crazy old widow who can't be trusted with a houseplant, let alone a child. You think you can take my son. You will never see him again. I'll make sure of it. You'll die alone in that house. I hope you're happy." I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt a strange, cold clarity. She was handing me the very weapons I needed. With steady hands, I screenshotted every single message, every threat, every vile accusation. I attached them to a new email. The subject line was simple: more evidence. I sent it to David. Her rage was a wildfire meant to burn me down. She didn't realize she was just illuminating the path to her own destruction. The family courtroom was a cold, sterile chamber, all polished wood and muted beige tones, designed to bleach the life and color out of human tragedy. I sat beside David Chen, my back straight, my hands folded calmly in my lap over my simple black purse. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a play. My only prayer was that Marco was safe in the judge's chambers, where he was being interviewed, far from this ugly theater. Diana had dressed for the part of the martyred mother. She wore a modest, high-necked gray dress, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, her face a carefully composed mask of sorrow. When she took the stand, her voice was soft, trembling just enough to be convincing. She painted a masterful picture of a loving, single mother at her wits' end with a difficult and uncommunicative teenager. "I try so hard, Your Honor," she whispered, dabbing a perfectly dry eye with a tissue. "I set rules for his own good to give him structure. But his grandmother, my mother, she means well, but she lets him do whatever he wants. Last month he had a major history project due. I insisted he finish it. He ran to Nana's, and she let him bake cookies all afternoon. She undermines me at every turn. It was a lie, of course. The project had been finished a week early. The cookies were a celebration. But the lie was plausible, designed to paint me as the foolish, indulgent one. Her lawyer, a slick man with a predatory smile, built on this foundation. He cross-examined me not with questions, but with insinuations. He brought up my age, my widowhood, my Italian heritage, twisting every aspect of my life into a weapon. "Mrs. Rossi, isn't it true that in your culture the grandmother often plays an overbearing role?" he'd asked. "Isn't it possible that in your loneliness you've become overly attached, blurring the lines between being a grandmother and a parent?" I met his condescending gaze. "It is my culture to love my family," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "And it is my duty to protect them when they are in harm's way." Then it was our turn. David Chen was the antithesis of Diana's lawyer. He was calm, methodical, and devastatingly precise. He didn't begin with drama, he began with facts. He called the school psychologist, who testified about Marco's documented anxiety, his plummeting grades, and the panic attacks that had become more frequent over the past year. He then submitted the official, multi-page report from the CPS investigator. A rustle went through the courtroom as the bailiff handed a copy to the judge. I watched her face, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, as she read. I saw her brow furrow, her expression shifting from neutral to concerned, then to grim. Diana's composure began to fray at the edges. Her mask of maternal grief was slipping, revealing the angry, impatient woman beneath. But the final, fatal blow was yet to come. "Your Honor," David said, his voice resonating in the now-silent courtroom. "We have heard Miss Rossi's testimony about her concerns for her son. A mother's words can build a child's world or tear it down. I would now like to present evidence of Miss Rossi's own words." He nodded to his assistant. The large screen on the wall, previously dormant, flickered to life. And there, magnified for the entire court to see, was the first of the text messages, displayed next to Diana's name and profile picture. "Did you make a scene at school again? You are a constant source of embarrassment." A collective, soft gasp rippled through the gallery. David let the words hang in the air for a long moment before clicking to the next one. And the next, a cascade of digital cruelty projected in stark black and white. "Your weakness disgusts me. My life would be so much easier if I didn't have to deal with you." I watched my daughter. The color drained from her face, leaving a pasty gray pallor. Her hands gripped the edge of her witness stand, her knuckles white. Her lawyer was staring down at his legal pad, refusing to look at the screen. The judge had stopped writing. Her eyes were fixed on the evidence, her face a stony mask of disbelief. Finally, David displayed the last message Diana had sent to her son. The words seemed to suck the very air from the room, leaving a thick, poisonous silence. "Sometimes I wish you didn't exist." The silence was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb, broken only by a small, choked sob from Diana herself. The judge slowly took off her glasses and placed them on her desk. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on my daughter, her expression one of cold, profound condemnation. In that moment, the legal proceeding was over. This was a human reckoning. The woman who had so eloquently performed the role of a loving mother had just been unmasked by her own hand. And there was nowhere left for her to hide. The judge's voice, when it came, was like the cracking of ice. "Miss Rossi," she said, her gaze never leaving Diana's face, "the evidence presented here is not of discipline. It is of sustained, calculated emotional abuse." She didn't need to deliberate. The verdict was swift and decisive. Emergency full legal and physical custody of Marco was granted to me, Lucia Rossi, effective immediately. Diana was stripped of her parental rights, pending a mandatory, comprehensive psychological evaluation and the completion of a court-ordered anger management program. Any visitation with Marco would be at my discretion, and for the foreseeable future, would have to be professionally supervised. A wave of relief so profound it was almost painful washed over me. I felt David's hand on my arm, a quiet gesture of support. Across the room, Diana crumpled. Her lawyer tried to speak to her, but she seemed not to hear him. The mask was gone, replaced by a face of raw, ugly disbelief. As the court adjourned, I walked to the side door where a bailiff was waiting with Marco. He looked small and terrified, his eyes darting around the hallway. When he saw me, his shoulders, which had been hunched up to his ears, relaxed just a fraction. Diana saw us. She pushed past her lawyer and strode towards us, her face a thundercloud of fury. "You've stolen him," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You've turned him against me. He's my son." I simply stepped in front of Marco, shielding him with my body. I looked my daughter in the eye. The woman I had bathed, fed, and sung lullabies to was gone. In her place was a stranger filled with poison. "No, Diana," I said, my voice clear and steady. "You gave him away. Every time you chose your anger over his heart, you gave him away." I turned my back on her. I didn't wait for a reply. I gently took Marco's hand. It was cold and trembling, but he curled his fingers around mine. We walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, indifferent afternoon sun, leaving the wreckage of our old family behind us. The drive home was silent. I didn't press him to talk. I just held his hand, my thumb stroking the back of his. As we turned onto our quiet, familiar street, I felt a shudder go through him. He leaned his head against my shoulder, and a single, hot tear fell onto my sleeve, then another and another. He wasn't sobbing loudly, just a quiet, wrenching release of pain that he had held inside for far too long. I didn't say a word. I just tightened my grip on his hand, letting him know he wasn't alone. He was finally on the road home. Months passed. The chill of the courtroom faded, replaced by the warmth of a late spring. My garden, my sanctuary, became his. The change in Marco wasn't a sudden miracle. It was a slow, quiet unfurling, like one of my night-blooming jasmine flowers. At first, he was a shadow at my side, watching me as I tended the earth. He would sit on the old stone bench for hours, saying nothing, just breathing the air, thick with the scent of lavender and rosemary. I never pushed him. I simply existed alongside him, my presence a quiet promise of stability. One morning, I was kneeling, my hands deep in the soil, planting new tomato seedlings. I felt a small shadow fall over me. It was Marco, holding out a watering can. "They look thirsty, Nana," he said. It was the first sentence he had initiated in months that wasn't a direct answer to a question. My heart swelled with a fierce, quiet joy. "You are right, mio caro," I smiled, taking the can. "Thank you." From that day on, the garden became our shared language. He learned the difference between oregano and marjoram by their scent. He learned the patient art of staking tomato vines and the satisfaction of pulling a stubborn weed. He started talking more, his voice slowly regaining its confidence. He told me about a book he was reading, a funny video he saw online, a memory of his grandfather he'd almost forgotten. Today, the sun is a warm blanket on our shoulders. He's taller now, his face has lost its gaunt look, and his eyes, once so empty, now hold a curious light. He is carefully, methodically watering the burgeoning zucchini plants, his brow furrowed in concentration. There's a smudge of dirt on his cheek, and for the first time in years, A genuine, unforced smile plays on his lips. "Nana," he says, turning to me, "do you think we could learn to make the tomato sauce this year? Your sauce, from scratch." I look at him, my grandson, standing here in the sunlight, covered in dirt and hope. I see the boy I thought I had lost and the young man he is becoming. The legal battles, the anger, the pain, they were the fire I had to walk through. But this, right here, is what I was fighting for. Not victory, not revenge, just this. This quiet, beautiful, ordinary moment of peace. In the safety of this garden, defended by a love he finally knows is unconditional, my boy is putting down new roots. And he is beginning to grow again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It's a reminder that sometimes the fiercest battles are fought for the quietest moments of peace. If you've ever had to stand up for someone you love, or for yourself, please know you're not alone. Feel free to share your own experiences in the comments below. Your story matters.